Hello, and welcome back to Family Secrets Unveiled, where we dive deep into the mysteries that lie hidden beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives. Today, we're going to share a story that will send shivers down your spine, a tale of loss, deception, and a truth so unsettling, it threatens to unravel the very fabric of a woman's existence. Imagine, if you will, a world where the most sacred bonds are broken, where grief turns to suspicion, and where a final resting place holds nothing but an agonizing void. This isn't just a story, it's a journey into the heart of darkness, where one woman's relentless search for answers leads her down a path she could never have foreseen. Our story begins in a quiet, unassuming town in upstate New York, a place where generations have lived and died, their histories intertwining like the ancient roots of the towering oaks that line its streets. Here, we meet Eleanor Vance, a woman in her late 30s, with eyes that held a peculiar mix of resilience and deep-seated sorrow. Eleanor was an artist, her hands often smudged with charcoal or paint, her canvases often depicting the melancholic beauty of the natural world. She lived a solitary life after the untimely death of her younger brother, Thomas, 5 years prior. Thomas, a bright and ambitious young man of 28, had been the light of her life, her confidant, her anchor. He had a quick wit and an infectious laugh that could fill any room, a passion for classic literature, and an uncanny ability to fix anything mechanical. His sudden passing from a tragic accident, a terrible fall during a hiking trip, had left an irreparable void in Eleanor's heart. The official report stated misadventure, a slippery trail, a moment of carelessness, a fatal plunge. The town mourned, and Eleanor, along with her aging parents, laid Thomas to rest in the family plot at the old cemetery, beneath a stately maple tree whose leaves turned a fiery red each autumn, a stark contrast to the cold stone of his headstone. The funeral had been a blur of tear-stained faces, hushed condolences, and the heavy scent of lilies. For 5 years, Eleanor visited that grave every Sunday, placing fresh flowers, whispering prayers, and trying to make peace with a loss that felt too vast to comprehend. But grief, as they say, can play tricks on the mind. It can twist perceptions, conjure doubts, and whisper insidious questions in the quiet hours of the night. For Eleanor, these whispers began subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. Little things. A half-remembered conversation with Thomas, where he mentioned wanting to explore a different part of the hiking trail, one not on the official map. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor in her father's voice when he spoke of the accident, a tremor she had dismissed as grief at the time. A lingering sensation that something about the entire event just didn't quite fit, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong spot. She tried to dismiss these feelings, attributing them to her own unprocessed sorrow, her mind searching for meaning where there was only senseless tragedy. After all, what comfort could there be in questioning the undeniable? The death certificate, the police report, the buried coffin, all were irrefutable proof of her brother's demise. Then came the catalyst, a seemingly innocuous event that would shatter her carefully constructed world. Eleanor's mother, frail and increasingly forgetful, had expressed a wish to move Thomas's grave to a more peaceful, sunlit spot within the cemetery, closer to where her own parents were buried. It was a sentimental request, driven by a mother's enduring love and a desire for perpetual closeness. Eleanor, though hesitant to disturb her brother's final rest, agreed to fulfill her mother's wishes. The cemetery superintendent, a kindly old man named Mr. Henderson with a permanent stoop and a pair of spectacles perched precariously on his nose, handled the arrangements with his usual quiet efficiency. The exhumation was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, a dreary, overcast day that seemed to mirror the somber task at hand. Eleanor decided to be there, a silent witness to this final act of devotion, a chance to say another goodbye, to finally let go. She stood at a respectful distance, the wind whipping her hair around her face, watching as the gravediggers, their faces grim, began their arduous work. The scraping of shovels against earth, the rhythmic thud of soil being displaced, each sound was a fresh stab to her heart. She closed her eyes, trying to steal herself, preparing for the sight of the wooden casket, for the final confirmation of her brother's presence. When she opened them again, a chilling silence had fallen over the small group gathered. The gravediggers had stopped, their shovels frozen midair. Mr. Henderson, usually unflappable, stood beside the gaping hole, his face ashen, his mouth slightly agape. A cold dread seeped into Eleanor's bones, a premonition of something deeply, terribly wrong. She walked slowly, her legs feeling like lead, towards the edge of the grave. What she saw there, or rather, what she didn't see, would forever change the course of her life. There was no coffin. The earth had been disturbed, yes, but the cavity where Thomas's final resting place should have been was utterly, unequivocally empty. Just soil, rocks, and the gaping maw of an inexplicable void. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken questions, with a horror so profound it stole the breath from her lungs. Her brother's grave was empty. The words echoed in her mind, a terrifying, impossible pronouncement. The world tilted on its axis. How could this be? Where was Thomas? The foundation of her grief, her acceptance, her understanding of reality, crumbled in that single, horrifying moment. This wasn't just a mistake, it was an atrocity, a betrayal of the dead, a chilling testament to a secret far darker than she could ever have imagined. And with that revelation, Eleanor knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and electrifying, that her brother's story was far from over. This wasn't a tragedy of misadventure, it was a mystery, an enigma veiled in silence, and she, Eleanor Vance, was now irrevocably bound to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The shock of the empty grave hit Eleanor like a physical blow, leaving her breathless and disoriented. Mr. Henderson, a man usually composed, was stammering, his face a mask of disbelief and confusion. The gravediggers exchanged bewildered glances, their tools now useless against this impossible reality. Eleanor felt a strange mix of terror and a fierce, burning determination ignite within her. Her brother wasn't there. This wasn't a case of a misplaced headstone or an administrative error. This was a deliberate, calculated absence. The police were called, of course. Detective Miller, a gruff but seemingly empathetic man in his early 50s with a perpetually tired expression and a meticulous notebook, arrived shortly after. He listened patiently as Eleanor, her voice trembling but resolute, recounted the events leading up to the discovery. He examined the empty grave, his brow furrowed in concentration, occasionally jotting down notes. He spoke in clipped, professional tones, asking questions about Thomas, his life, his friends, his enemies. Enemies? The word felt alien, incongruous with the memory of her kind-hearted brother. But now everything felt alien. The initial police investigation yielded little. No signs of forced entry to the cemetery, no other disturbed graves. The official conclusion, delivered with a hint of apologetic regret by Detective Miller, was that it must have been a highly sophisticated act of desecration, an unimaginable cruelty. But Eleanor wasn't convinced. Her intuition screamed otherwise. She remembered the subtle unease she'd always felt about Thomas's accident, the faint tremor in her father's voice. Now, these tiny discrepancies amplified into deafening alarms. She started digging, not in the literal sense, but metaphorically, into Thomas's life. She revisited his apartment, untouched since his death, sifting through his belongings, searching for any clue, any hint that might explain this monstrous void. His books, his old sketchbooks filled with architectural designs. Thomas had been an aspiring architect, his well-worn guitar. All seemed to offer no answers. However, a week after the exhumation, a peculiar discovery surfaced during one of Eleanor's solitary searches. Tucked away in the false bottom of a dusty old chest set Thomas had inherited from their grandfather, she found a small, leather-bound journal. It wasn't Thomas's usual meticulously organized planner. This one was different, its pages filled with frantic, almost illegible handwriting. The entries were sporadic, sometimes days apart, sometimes several entries on the same day. As Eleanor began to read, a cold knot formed in her stomach. The early entries spoke of Thomas's growing excitement about a new project he was working on, a design proposal for a major architectural firm in the city. He hinted at innovative ideas, at breaking new ground. But then, the tone shifted. The enthusiasm gave way to apprehension, then fear. He wrote about unforeseen complications, unethical practices, and a vague sense of being watched. He mentioned a colleague, a man named Marcus Thorne, a senior architect at the firm, with increasing trepidation. Thorne, Thomas wrote, was charming but ruthless, with a history of undercutting others for his own gain. The journal entries grew more urgent, detailing late-night phone calls, veiled threats, and Thomas's growing suspicion that something far more sinister than office politics was at play. He wrote about a specific document, a set of blueprints, that he believed held a crucial secret, a secret that Thorne was desperate to keep hidden. "If anything happens to me," one entry read, scrawled in a shaky hand, "look for the blueprints. They'll tell you everything." This journal was the first real crack in the facade of Thomas's accident. Eleanor reread the entries, her mind racing. Blueprints. Unethical practices. Marcus Thorne. The pieces, though scattered, were beginning to form a horrifying picture. She remembered Thorne from Thomas's funeral, a slick, impeccably dressed man who had offered his condolences with a smile that hadn't quite reached his eyes. He had seemed overly solicitous, almost relieved. At the time, Eleanor had dismissed it as the awkwardness of a colleague attending a young man's funeral. Now, it felt sinister. She knew she couldn't go to the police with just a journal. It was circumstantial, a deceased man's paranoid ramblings to an outsider. She needed more. She needed the blueprints. Her search for the blueprints led her to the architectural firm where Thomas had worked. It was a sleek, modern building of glass and steel in the heart of the city. Eleanor, armed with a fabricated story about collecting some of Thomas's personal effects, managed to gain access to his old office. It was a sterile, impersonal space, cleared of most of his belongings, but she felt his presence there, a lingering echo of his ambition and his fear. She meticulously searched, her heart pounding, her senses on high alert. She rummaged through drawers, checked behind filing cabinets, even ran her hands along the underside of his old desk. Nothing. The blueprints, if they existed, were not here. Just as she was about to give up, a glint of metal caught her eye. Beneath a loose floorboard near the window, a small, cleverly concealed compartment. Her hands trembled as she pried it open. Inside, wrapped in a faded cloth, were not blueprints, but a single, old-fashioned USB drive and a heavily encrypted external hard drive. A small victory, but the battle was far from over. This felt like a dead end, or rather, a new beginning, a new layer to the mystery. The technology felt like a deliberate choice, something that wouldn't be easily found or understood by just anyone. Thomas, ever the clever one, had hidden his secrets well. The encryption on the hard drive proved to be a formidable obstacle. Eleanor spent days, then weeks, trying various passwords, common phrases, dates significant to Thomas. Nothing worked. The USB drive, however, offered a glimmer of hope. When she plugged it into her laptop, a single file appeared, labeled simply, Project Chimera. Her fingers trembled as she clicked on it. What unfolded on her screen was not a blueprint, but a series of highly technical documents, photographs, and what appeared to be schematics for a revolutionary new type of energy generator. The details were beyond her artistic comprehension, but the implications were clear. This wasn't just an architectural project, it was something far bigger, something that hinted at immense power and even greater danger. The journal's words echoed in her mind, unethical practices. Project Chimera, it seemed, was at the heart of Thomas's fears and, quite possibly, at the heart of his disappearance. The emptiness of his grave was not an act of desecration, but a chillingly efficient way to erase a life, to silence a truth that threatened to expose a corporate conspiracy of staggering proportions. Eleanor realized with a jolt that she wasn't just looking for her brother's remains, she was unearthing a secret that powerful people would kill to keep buried. Her grief had transformed into a dangerous quest, And the quiet artist was now an unwitting detective, standing on the precipice of a truth that could either bring her peace or destroy her entirely. The revelation of Project Chimera on the USB drive plunged Eleanor into a world far removed from her serene artistic life. The technical jargon, the intricate schematics, the sheer scale of the energy generator detailed in the documents, it was all overwhelming, yet undeniably real. Thomas hadn't just been an aspiring architect. He had stumbled upon something monumental, something that could either revolutionize the world or plunge it into chaos. The more she delved into the files, cross-referencing names and dates, the clearer the picture became. Project Chimera was a clandestine initiative developed by Thorne and a shadowy consortium of investors aimed at creating a highly efficient, potentially limitless energy source. But beneath the veneer of innovation lay a dark secret. The technology was unstable, highly dangerous, and its implementation would involve catastrophic environmental risks. Thomas, being the diligent and ethically driven architect he was, had discovered these flaws and attempted to blow the whistle. His journal entries now made terrifying sense. He hadn't been paranoid. He had been a man fighting for truth against an impending disaster, and it had cost him everything. Eleanor's heart ached with a renewed sense of loss and a burning anger. Her brother had been a hero, not a victim of a mere accident. And the empty grave? It wasn't an act of desecration. It was a cold, calculated move to erase his existence, to prevent anyone from ever looking for him again. But someone was looking. Her. And now she knew what she was up against. A powerful corporation and a ruthless man like Marcus Thorne, who would stop at nothing to protect his interests. She tried to approach Detective Miller again, armed with the USB drive and Thomas's journal. He listened, his expression skeptical, his eyes betraying a hint of weariness. "Eleanor," he said, his voice laced with caution, "this is a lot of conjecture. A deceased man's private thoughts, highly technical documents. It's not enough to go on, not without concrete proof linking Thorne directly to Thomas's disappearance, and to this Project Chimera being anything more than a theoretical concept." He advised her to let the police handle the missing remains investigation, implying she was delving too deep into a conspiracy theory. He was trying to protect her, perhaps, but his refusal only fueled her resolve. She realized she was alone in this. The external hard drive, however, still held the key. The encryption was a complex, multi-layered beast. Days turned into nights, fueled by coffee and a burning desire for justice, as Eleanor exhausted every possible method to crack it. She contacted an old friend of Thomas's, a brilliant but eccentric computer hacker named Silas, who had always admired Thomas's intellect. Silas, a pale, rail-thin man with thick glasses and a nervous twitch, listened to Eleanor's story with growing fascination. He recognized the encryption software immediately, a highly sophisticated, military-grade program. "This wasn't just anyone," Silas muttered, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "This was professional." He worked tirelessly, and after what felt like an eternity, the drive finally yielded its secrets. What they found was a treasure trove of evidence, encrypted emails between Thorne and various shadowy figures discussing the Thomas problem, financial transactions diverting vast sums of money, and most chillingly, a series of video files. The first video was grainy, taken from a hidden camera in Thomas's office. It showed a heated argument between Thomas and Thorne. Thomas was visibly distressed, pointing to blueprints spread across his desk, clearly arguing about the ethical implications of Project Chimera. Thorne, initially calm, grew increasingly agitated, his charming facade cracking to reveal a cold, menacing fury. He threatened Thomas, not subtly, but directly, explicitly stating that if Thomas exposed the project, he would regret it profoundly. The second video was even more horrifying. It showed Thorne, accompanied by two hulking men, ambushing Thomas outside his apartment late one night. There was a struggle, muffled shouts, and then Thomas being forcibly dragged into a black van. The date stamp on the video was just days before Thomas's reported accident. This wasn't an accident. It was an abduction. The final video was a recording of a phone call, Thorne's voice chillingly calm, speaking to an unknown individual. "The loose end has been dealt with," Thorne said. "The body has been disposed of. The accident has been staged. The grave will be a convenient distraction." The pieces slammed into place with a horrifying finality. Thomas hadn't died in a hiking accident. He had been kidnapped, almost certainly murdered, and his body disposed of in a way that left no trace. The empty grave was not a result of desecration, but a macabre flourish, a cruel joke to ensure no one would ever question his absence. Thorne hadn't just wanted to silence Thomas. He wanted to erase him from existence, to make it appear as if he had never been there at all. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea, followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. Her brother had been cruelly snatched from her, his life snuffed out for the sake of corporate greed and power. The full extent of the conspiracy was breathtaking, and she, a solitary artist, was now holding the smoking gun. This was the climax, the moment of truth. Eleanor knew she couldn't go to the police again with just these files. Thorne was too powerful, too well-connected. She remembered Thomas's desperate scrawls in his journal. "If anything happens to me, look for the blueprints. They'll tell you everything." She realized the USB and hard drive were the blueprints, not just architectural drawings, but the entire incriminating roadmap of Project Chimera and Thorne's murderous actions. Her heart pounded with a desperate urgency. She had to expose Thorne, not just for Thomas, but for the countless lives that Project Chimera's dangerous technology could threaten. She looked at Silas, his face pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "We have to go public," she stated, her voice trembling but firm. "We have to show the world what he's done." The quiet artist was gone, replaced by a woman driven by a fierce, unyielding need for justice. The fight had truly begun. The decision to go public was not made lightly. Eleanor and Silas knew the risks were immense. Marcus Thorne, with his vast resources and ruthless connections, would stop at nothing to prevent this information from seeing the light of day. But the thought of Thomas, silenced and erased, spurred them on. They meticulously organized the evidence, the journal entries, the Project Chimera schematics, the incriminating emails, and most damning of all, the video footage of Thomas's abduction and Thorne's chilling phone call. They compiled it into a comprehensive, irrefutable dossier, a digital bomb set to explode. Their plan was to leak the information simultaneously to multiple independent investigative journalists and a few trusted online news platforms, making it impossible for Thorne to suppress the truth entirely. The day they released the information was fraught with tension. Eleanor felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Her hands shook as she pressed the send button, unleashing the secrets of Project Chimera and the truth about her brother's disappearance into the digital ether. The initial hours were agonizing. Silence. Then, the first ripple. A small, online investigative blog picked up the story. Then another. And another. Within hours, the internet was abuzz. The video of Thomas's abduction went viral. The sheer audacity of the cover-up, the cold-blooded nature of Thorne's actions, and the environmental implications of Project Chimera ignited a firestorm of outrage. News anchors, initially skeptical, were forced to cover the unfolding scandal as public demand for answers surged. The backlash against Marcus Thorne and his consortium was swift and merciless. Federal investigators, now armed with irrefutable evidence, descended upon the architectural firm. Thorne, caught completely off guard, tried to flee the country, but he was apprehended at the airport, his carefully constructed empire crumbling around him. The two men who had assisted in Thomas's abduction were also tracked down and arrested, their testimonies confirming every detail in Eleanor's dossier. Project Chimera, once a clandestine ambition, was shut down, its dangerous potential diffused before it could wreak havoc. The full scope of the conspiracy, the bribed officials, the hidden accounts, the environmental risks, all came tumbling out into the public sphere, a stark reminder of unchecked corporate power. Eleanor watched the news reports from the quiet solitude of her studio, a profound sense of exhaustion and a quiet triumph settling over her. Justice, in its own slow and arduous way, had been served. Thorne was facing a lifetime in prison, and his accomplices would pay for their crimes. The world now knew Thomas's true story, not as a victim of a tragic accident, but as a brave man who died fighting for what was right. The empty grave was no longer a symbol of his erasure, but a poignant testament to the lengths powerful people would go to silence the truth, and to the unwavering love of a sister who refused to let him be forgotten. The aftermath, however, was not without its lingering shadows. Eleanor's parents, though relieved by the truth, were shattered by the brutal reality of their son's death. They struggled to reconcile the gentle boy they raised with the harsh circumstances of his demise. Eleanor, too, carried the scars of her journey. The world no longer seemed as simple, as safe as it once did. But amidst the pain, there was a profound sense of peace. She had honored Thomas, not just with flowers at a gravesite, but by giving his sacrifice meaning. She continued her art, but her canvases now held a new depth, a raw honesty that reflected the complexities of life, loss, and the resilience of the human spirit. She visited the cemetery, not to the empty plot, but to a new memorial stone placed in Thomas's honor, inscribed with words that spoke of his courage and his unwavering integrity. It was a place of remembrance, not of agonizing uncertainty. This story, the one we've shared with you today on Family Secrets Unveiled, is a chilling reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that even in the quietest corners of our lives, unimaginable secrets can fester. It's a testament to the power of a sister's love, a fierce determination to uncover the truth, and the enduring belief that even the most powerful darkness cannot extinguish the light of justice. Thomas Vance's grave may have been empty, but his legacy, forged in courage and revealed through his sister's relentless quest, will resonate for generations to come. His story reminds us to look closer, to question what doesn't sit right, and to never, ever give up on the ones we love. If you were gripped by Eleanor's journey, if this tale of hidden truths and unwavering courage resonated with you, please show your support. Like this video, subscribe to Family Secrets Unveiled for more incredible stories, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into the mysteries that shape our world. We're here to unravel the secrets, one untold story at a time. Thank you for watching.